Hi, my name is Rob Ryder, speaking out of West Cornwall, and I'm joined here again tonight from Patrick Quanton out of Andalusia. Hi again, Patrick.
Good evening, Rob.
Yeah, so we've come quite a long way at the moment. So we've got the seminar, Your Health in Your Hands, in 4 parts on the channel. We've done, I think it's about 12 episodes breaking down the seminar. And I think we're both in agreement now that we've kind of laid the foundation and that the temptation is go into more details, and then people mentally will get lost in the details. And I think it's a time tonight where we're going to see what comes out of tonight and see if we can do a summary. And because there are infinite details on health. But as you've mentioned, really, there's only one illness, which is a life out of balance.
Yeah.
And there's nowadays, if you go off the medical profession, there's about 10,000 different expressions of that. And we would literally be here forever to analyze them 10,000 different expressions. So we're going to try and stick to the basics and the principle. Before I throw a few questions at you, if you can just explain to people why we're doing this, why we're going to stick to the principles and not get lost in the details from your own personal experience of going through all this.
Well, the thing is that with the details, you mix things up. People tend to come up and say, I've been diagnosed this. What does that mean energetically? Or, does that mean I've got an expansion disease or a compression disease? Or you don't start mixing the two systems up. This is not a complementary system. This is a totally different system. So you've got to start to learn to think and feel and approach from an energetic angle. So the question is always, what is behind this? Why? And you have to keep asking the question, why? So if you start off with a diagnosis of arthritis, then the question is, why? What is arthritis? Arthritis, it's an itis, so it's an inflammation. Okay, so what is an inflammation? Inflammation is this what we have explained, and then you go down that path. You don't go, but they have found this particular thing, or they have said, I've got that particular thing, or I've got a cloth, or I've got a this or a that. No, you've got to widen it out to the broader picture and always stay on the main road instead of going off the main road and into the smaller roads and then getting lost. You lose your direction. Keep on track. That's the thing. Keep on track.
Yeah, so that made me think this week that it's, even though I've enjoyed this series, we could go on forever. We will go off track eventually. It's
Yeah.
unavoidable.
Yeah.
And I don't want to complicate things because I myself get lost in the details. And when things are simple, I can deal with that. And we're trying to make this accessible to everybody.
Yeah.
So
But at the same time, accessible to everybody, but people got to start learning to approach health, life, nature in a different way, not in a cognitive, intelligent way, as in a thinking way, believing that we know everything. Let's just sit back, observe, and yes, you come to some conclusions, but then you have to observe whether your conclusions are right or not. So it's different from trying to interfere continuously. Yeah. So let's see how far we go with that.
So yeah, it's not in my notes actually, but it's just sprung to mind with you mentioning that. I think I've mentioned it on another conversation that for quite a few years now, I just do not like thinking. it's almost a trauma to me when Edith asked me to do something where I have to think. And that's why I had this kind of dream of being a peasant farmer, because you get up, you know what you need to do in the land, you know what wood to chop, there's not much thinking involved. And the books that I've wrote with you and I've wrote on my own over the last few years were actually a way for me personally to get all this information, logical thinking information, out of my own mind, put it on some paper, and it's kind of gone.
Yeah.
So what you're saying there is kind of what's happened to me over the last few years, and it was a great liberation for me to write these books because I don't need to think anymore. Except now and again there might be a certain task.
Yeah.
But actually, what you're saying there makes sense from my own personal experiences. Throwing that logical information out, right? I don't need it anymore.
Yeah. The thinking should be compressed into specific time frames where we sit down and think about it and contemplate things, and then we get up and forget about it and go and observe again, because that is where your information is, and that is where your answers are as well.
Yeah, yeah. So just this first part is stick on the idea of the mind and behavior. And I just want to revisit an article that you published on the Active Healthcare website about 2 months ago regarding behavior disorders. We have mentioned that previously, but I just want to revisit it because last week we talked purely about the mind and you deconstructed the mind and how it works. So if we just revisit behavior disorders again with that added foundation of the mind. So in a holistic sense, we're talking about a life out of balance, and we can give it these names. We can give it bipolar, schizophrenia, depression. So how would you, with that foundation of the mind from last week, how would you slightly revisit behavior disorders so people can maybe see it in a more holistic way and then give themselves, because I'm a very practical person as well, give themselves a practical path forward with their emotional and behavioral issues?
Well, first of all, understanding a bit, because we tend to focus on the wrong things when we start interfering. First of all, understand, never forget, your life is being governed by your unconscious mind. And your unconscious mind is full of patterns of behavior, patterns of reaction to environment. It does that automatically, almost blindly. Those patterns have been written by mainly two systems. One is what is, let's say, in your DNA. It's in your basic construction. It contains all the information that humanity, and particularly the human race and culture and area that you are born into, that have gathered that information and passed it on as absolute truth, if you like. This is what you've got to know, otherwise you won't survive. The second part of that learning process, and where the patterns are based on, is what the individual, with its basic construction, how that individual is going to survive specifically in its specific environment. So in the family environment, it's what the fetus and the baby learns very quickly through mainly its mother, how she experiences her environment. Those two together gives you your basic setup. That is who you are. You're not going to change any of that. You are who you are. You've got the talents that you've got your weaknesses, you've got your strengths. That is it. The rest is then a learning process, which will partly, on the surface, change a few bits in the unconscious mind. And it's a learning process that is mainly happening through the conscious mind. And in the conscious mind, you can then start to alter some of the expressions of those reaction patterns. To give an example, something happens, something specific, and you get very angry about it. For whatever reason, you feel threatened or whatever, it doesn't matter. That's your reactive pattern. You get angry. How you express that anger, that is something you can change. So you can start throwing things about, you can stab people to death, you can punch people, you can do whatever, or you can learn to face your anger and go, oh, wait a minute, this is inappropriate. I shouldn't behave like that. So I'm still going to feel angry about it, but I'm going to change my behavior. That is your conscious mind. You can do that in your conscious mind. The first place, you've got to observe how you respond. So you see the initial responsive reaction. Then you see this is the feeling that you're getting. Then you see how you translate that feeling into some thoughts. You start blaming somebody, and he or she should have behaved differently, or they shouldn't have said this, or they shouldn't have done that. And then how you respond to that. So when we have, as an adult, what we call behavior problems, whatever that may mean, some of which you've mentioned, that is what you can change. But in order to change it, you've got to first acknowledge it. You can't get rid of your alcohol addiction if you don't acknowledge that you've got a drinking problem. You can't acknowledge, or you can't get rid of your depression if you don't acknowledge that you are the one that is getting yourself depressed. Yes, life may be very difficult for you. Yes, dramatic things may have happened to you. But you are the one that allows yourself to get depressed, that tells yourself there is no way forward, that you can't see the light at the end of the tunnel. You are the one that closes your eyes to that light, or you can go and look for it. And that's the change. So behavior disorders, whatever that may mean, in modern language, is something that needs to be attacked from the inside. The first step is recognition that you are at the helm of this. You steer this, so you can change it. May not be easy, but without sticking to that first step and accomplishing this first step, you're not going to get anywhere with it. When we see behavioral disorders in children, that means that child very soon in life, very early in life, doesn't see a way out, is stuck somewhere. And then it's up to its environment, surroundings, parents, family, teachers, but mainly family, really, because that is where young children are still getting their energy from and their life energy from. For them to realize that there is a serious mismatch between what is inside that child and the way that life around it is evolving. It's only by recognizing that we can then start working on how to change things. So behavioral disorders, look at yourself. Don't be a victim. Take charge of your own life. Painful, difficult, long-winded, yes, but very much worth it, because that is the only way out of it.
Yeah, so my passion a little bit is behavior disorders with children, because it's like an epidemic now, and we've gone into that, the formation of a human being, etc. But what I see is, regardless of whether we like this society or not, we have to find a way to survive in it. first foremost, our job is to survive the environment we're in, whether we like it or not. And if your child is struggling, yeah, you have to look at your own immediate family more than anything, rather than the outside world, what's going on there and the dynamics there. And there seems to be a very fine balance of supporting the child and protecting to an extent, but also encouraging and pushing the child. And it's quite a fine line, I've observed, that if you push too far, you get the negative and it can knock you back. But if you don't push enough, the child kind of stagnates. So is that what we're talking about? Trying to encourage the child without pushing too far and getting that fine balance with children?
Yes, it is. And it's exactly like that. And the reason that it's such a fine balance is because the child and the child's development has been compressed so much that there is very little real living space left. So it's then very difficult for the outside world, say parents, to actually know what that living space is. You've got to keep observing the child, and you've got to be prepared to continuously change what you're doing. So in other words, you feel the need to push a child to do something. Okay, so you push it, you put pressure on the child to do it. You have to look at how the child responds. First response will be, no, I won't do it because I'm afraid, I don't want to, whatever it is. You keep pushing until there's a change, a kind of a breaking point. You have to stop, you have to pull back. And then you have to go again. Why? Because you have to expand that living space within the child. And the only way that can happen is for the child to find the courage to blow its own living space, the space that it owns and that it can make decisions about, to blow that up, to enlarge that. So you on the outside can't do that. You can pull it apart and you can provide the space, and the child will shrink and be very afraid because they don't know what to do with it. So it's a continual movement of putting pressure on the child so that the child expands. But if the child contracts even further, you've got to diminish the pressure. And then again, why? Because the child needs to gain confidence and needs to gain the idea that it is actually okay to generate that much energy and expand and push the energy into the outside world and create my own bubble, my own living space. So, yes, it's a balancing act. Hello, life, health, it's balance. Always is.
So that's quite interesting for me how you've explained that, because we only set the theme of these conversations. We don't know, I don't know what you're going to say. So I've just a massive, not light bulb, because I've been studying this for years with you, but the way you've explained it there, we've gone into chronic illness where you need to interfere, whereas acute illness, you don't. And we've summed up chronic illness recently regarding everything is about temperature and pressure. And you've explained there this child's unwillingness to expand their horizons as a contracted child, as it were.
Mm-hmm.
And when you have chronic contraction, you need to apply pressure. If it's a physical muscle, you need to apply pressure, not too much that you're going to cause more damage, but just enough to create the expansive reaction. So again, everything comes down to temperature and pressure, even on that behavioral energetic level.
Exactly. And to be quite clear, when we're looking at a behavioral problem, whether it's an adult or a child, when that is not because the child or the adult gets angry one time. Behavioral problem means a continual process. What does that mean? It's chronic. It's all the time. So you have to treat it as a chronic disease, or we have to apply the same approach to behavioral problems as we do to the chronic diseases. So think about that.
Yeah, that's quite interesting where you manipulate the physical chronic illness and this emotional behavioral chronic illness. So that's, again, we've gone back to the same. This is why I didn't want to get lost in the details, because we've come back to the same principles of pressure and temperature.
Absolutely.
Which, again, to repeat, that's why we started at the beginning of creation of the forces of creation, because that keeps repeating back to that same pattern of creation and the forces.
Yeah.
So
always the same.
another thing I've noticed as well, you get, I think people call it bipolar, I'm not sure, when they're quite happy and outgoing for a while and then they go really into themselves. And my interpretation of that is people are kind of putting on a show. They haven't really got that balance in the world, but they're out there trying and doing the best. But because it isn't a sincere, authentic balance, every now and again, I know people that will go into themselves for maybe a week and close off. And it's like that is a rebalancing of that inauthentic self that has been out there for 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks. And that seems like a contraction to rebalance the overexpansion. Is that kind of a little bit of my interpretation there? Okay.
That is correct. Actually, bipolar is normal because every wave goes up and down. That's normal. That's the wave pattern of every energy field that we know of. So bipolar means normal. The only thing that you could say about this kind of normal, when it becomes a problem, it's too extreme. So in terms of a wave, you could say that the highs are too high and the lows are too low. It's still in balance. Yeah, and they balance it out the way you just explained it. So this is why modern society is so bad for people, because we're always looking for extreme thrills. Everything's got to be extremely, we've got to be extremely happy. We can't just be contented, like this. No, it's got to be like that. And we forget that if we push people up that far, they will come down further because there is a balance. It's life. Yeah. So if you want to get out of the extremes of your bipolar situation, the only thing you've got to do is not to allow yourself to go up too high. And if you focus on that rather than the hole that I'm in now is so deep, it's dreadful, it's awful, I need to lift myself up. No. The problem is that you've gone too high. If you stop going this high, then you won't fall this deep. It's very difficult for people to accept that, but it's the only way forward. It is making sure or watching how high you get in your mental state, in your behavior, how expansive do you get? Because if it's too extreme, you will contract extremely. And that means you get yourself into a deep hole, mental hole, blackness and all of that. So, we don't need to go to exotic, extremely hot places too often, because we will get cold an awful lot more than if we stay somewhere in the middle or around the middle. You don't have to stay in the middle because everything moves all the time, but make sure you don't go too far either way.
Yeah, and I've noticed that being self-employed for many years, most of my life also, if you physically exert yourself, working past your limit, your balance, eventually you can't work at any pace for a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
So again, it's trying to find that balance. And yeah, from a physical point of view, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
Exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I've had a little bit of personal experience, have we all had? But I can't, it's some kind of quote I've heard that somebody had 10 years of counseling and yet they changed their life in a second.
Mm-hmm.
And when you have that awareness and that light moment, you may have been studying it for years and years to get to this moment, but the actual change sometimes literally happens like that. But some people, for whatever reason, have to go through the whole process. But literally, if you can understand how it works, the actual change, the big change anyway, literally does happen in a second.
Yeah. And counseling is a way of keeping your mind focused on the details. You have to talk about everything. You have to analyze everything. The real counseling and the real way out of things, and or way forward, or way entering in a new way of life, a new way of doing things. It's very simple, that kind of counseling. You set out the direction in which you need to go. And the counseling, the only thing the counseling needs to do is keep repeating that same thing over and over and over again, irrespective of what the situation is, irrespective of what has happened. It's always the same. Stop being afraid. Stop being too extreme. Watch yourself. You're doing it again. And that's all it is. The details don't matter. You got to look at your reaction pattern that is repeating itself. And it's not about why and who's to blame and little things that could make it better or make me feel better. It doesn't matter if I feel bad or good. If I keep using the same reactive pattern, then it will keep happening again. If I want to change that, then I have to look at the pattern, nothing else.
Yeah, and it's for me, counseling is a little bit like digesting food. You want to digest the food, take any beneficial information out of it, then get rid of it because you don't need it anymore. And if you're stuck in the digestive counseling of the emotion of the trauma or whatever, you've not let it go.
No.
So for me, counseling, you could have counseling having a cup of tea with a friend.
Yeah.
If you just need to process what's happened, but then it has to be let go. It has to be what becomes.
And a good friend is a friend that tells you to stop whinging, to stop doing the same old thing. That's a good friend. Not a friend who's always saying, oh, I feel so sorry for you. I feel so sad for you. I feel so. That's the difference.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think just before the next section, we've got just enough time for one more question regarding this theme of addiction. So if you just keep an eye on the clock there, regarding addiction, you've mentioned also before in the past, you can have so-called healthy habits that are actually, if you're dependent on them, are not really good either. And again, addictions need to be broken. And I mean, I'm a very practical person, and I heard somebody say, if you make a list of every of your addiction, what happens when I go with it? But what happens if I can break it? So you can visualize, because I'm very visual, you visualize a positive path forward every time, if it's alcohol, that glass is there and your hand goes, then remember the positive path and remember the negative path. But
Yeah.
also, like you've mentioned, you can have your herbal tea every morning. If it's an addiction, if
Yeah.
you're dependent on it, that could be bad.
Try and yeah, try and make it clear. The definition of an addiction is a habit that you no longer control. And how do you know that you're no longer controlling it? It's a habit that when you break it, you will get physical and or mental discomfort. So in other words, it's a habit. What does that mean? It's something we do all the time. Yeah. All the time may mean 3 times a day, once a week, once a month, once a year, whatever. But we keep doing it. We don't really think about it. It makes us feel good. A habit makes you feel good because you don't have to think about it and it's comforting. It's a habit. It's there. Oh, it's still there. It's good. So the difference between a habit and an addiction is the fact that you've lost control. And you know that because when you break the habit, you then suffer a discomfort of some sort. So in order to know whether you're addicted to something or not, stop it. Just stop it. And that goes for everything. That goes for smoking, for drinking, for coffee, for, as you say, herbal teas, or organic food, or whatever it is. You know, we become obsessed by things. Not a good idea. Why not? Because an obsession, as well as an addiction, causes anxiety. What happens if I don't have it? If I don't have it, it's bad for me. I'm going to die, or I'm going to be sick, or I'm going to be, discomfort. And I don't want discomfort. So I need to have it. Whether it's a recognized healthy habit, like I've got to go running 3 times a week, otherwise I feel bad, or I have to have my 10 hours sleep, otherwise the next day is a waste of time. I'll be tired all day. Really? Try it and don't. And if that is the case, then you're addicted to what? To that thought. You're addicted to that thought. You've given yourself your own power away. You're no longer flexible. And life is about flexibility. Life is about being able to move to the left and to the right when appropriate. In other words, I have my coffee in the morning. Why? Because I like it. It makes me feel good. Okay, what happens if I don't have my coffee in the morning? Nothing happens. Nothing happens. Why not? Because I don't think about the coffee. And if I think about the coffee and I look around me and I think, oh no, I'm not in a situation to have a coffee, then that's fine. Yeah. It's not that I've got less energy or that my stomach is upset or whatever. And that is the key point. It's always it's the same thing. This is an automatic reaction pattern, a pattern that sets you off or that gives you your base in life, everyday life, simple things in life. You don't think about it, you just use it. That's perfectly okay. If we didn't have any habits, we would have too much to figure out each day and we wouldn't get through the day. So we need habits. But we shouldn't rely on the habits, and don't think that if a habit or something that you've created a habit about, when it's not happening, then I'm in trouble. No, you're not in trouble. There are plenty of other ways of getting through the day, getting through the month. Yeah. If you can't go on a skiing holiday, is your year then ruined? I don't think so. If you think it is, you have a problem. Yeah, call it an addiction. It's an addiction to a habit, to a reactive pattern. That reactive pattern can be a thought, can be a feeling, can be an action. And it's important for us to start observing that we survive even when that isn't happening. So, even if you can't have your smoke, or you can't have your drink, or you can't have your coffee, or you can't have your organic food, you're not going to die. And that is important. It's watch yourself and make that observation. Tell yourself that life goes on with or without your habit, inside or outside your habit. It's okay, and it will remain okay.
So what you're saying there, just to cap off, reminds me of what you mentioned in the seminar. So again, I always encourage people to go back to the seminar. There are some times in life you want to be an oak tree and you want to stand your ground. This is what I believe in. I'm not budging. I don't care what you think. This is it. But most of the time in life, you want to be the palm tree. Life is changeable. You need the flexibility. The only tree that's really going to survive the storm is the palm tree. So most of your life, the palm tree, and be very conscious and aware when you are going to be the oak tree. That kind of sums the addiction up there, I think.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So this again, you've gone through it in the seminar, but I want to go into medical diagnostics because obviously you've come from a medical background. So if you look maybe from your days as a GP and you compare it even to now, I mean, all even in your time, you were using diagnostics, you were trying to give something a name, but the extreme levels it's gone to now, with the whole of the NHS is massive amounts is being funded on diagnostics. We've got AI systems coming into diagnostics. If you just talk us through that a little bit, what the idea of it, how it's changed, and the basically insanity of it.
Well, to start with, the diagnostics was basically a doctor asking you a few questions, observing the patient, or making observations about the patient, and maybe, add to his observations by performing a few small investigations. And that could be something like, moving a joint around, or putting a hand on the tummy, or listening to the breath in the lungs, or something simple. And then the doctor would make a diagnosis. So that basically was what the doctor thought was wrong with you. So it was his opinion. Now, allopathic medicine, Western medicine, doesn't care for somebody's opinion, because, of course, if you then bring 10 doctors in to see the same patient to hear the same story, you may get 6 or 7 different opinions, different diagnoses. Medical profession doesn't care too much about that. It wants objectivity. It doesn't want an opinion. It wants to be able to prove a diagnosis. So it is moved in a very short space of time, in just a few decennia. It is moved from the art of medicine, which is, my experience and my feeling about it. And I look at the patient, and I look at the bed that he's lying in, and the house, and the people around him, and what he does as a job, and so on and so forth. and it creates an opinion about what is not going so well for him at this moment in time. But the medical profession wants objectivity. So it has moved it, and it has moved almost completely now from being an art to test result. It's only what the test result tells you that must be the diagnosis. So the test can be a picture, it can be a blood investigation, or it can be anything that they can put on paper, if you like, that they hold in their hand and that they can show to somebody else and say, there you are, this is what it is. The fact that obviously that doesn't work all the time. I mean, just a few examples. Radiology. So you take an X-ray picture to have a look whether a bone is fractured or not, and you may miss that fracture. And it's only later on, because there are complications, that you can then see the fracture on the initial picture, or you think you see the fracture on the initial picture. Another one is ultrasonic proof of pregnancy, and very often they miss a second or a third baby. They never see it because it's hidden behind and they're not looking for it. So it's obviously not always correct, and you can't rely on it. What they've failed to convey to people is that there are limitations on the tests that you're doing. You set up a test in a particular way, and that gives you a particular result. That is limitations of the test. And then you've got the second part, which is the interpretation of the test, which means, is this a fracture? Is it not a fracture? Is this level in the blood of this particular thing at this moment in time, is that too high or is it not too high? Is the blood pressure, given what I know about this person at this moment in time, is the blood pressure too high or not too high? Interpretation. So there's always a human factor in it, and yet they want, now with artificial intelligence, they want to get rid of that human factor altogether, because humans make mistakes. Yes, I acknowledge that humans make mistakes, but the way they say it and the way they portray it is as if what they call artificial intelligence is not making any mistakes. I would say computer programs won't make any mistakes then. Well, I think our experience, and I think all of us have got that experience, is that computer programs do make mistakes and they do fail. It's not always right. Yeah. So setting up a test in a particular way gives you a particular result, and interpreting the test in a particular way gives you a particular result. And that is the diagnosis. The problem is not that there is a difference or possible difference of opinion between doctors, specialists, on a diagnosis. That never was a problem. The problem is that we make people believe that one diagnosis is right and the other one is wrong. And in that framework, the tests don't lie, apparently. So the doctor may got it wrong, but the test is always right. And that, to me, is a very dangerous development. Not because whether or not we make more mistakes or less mistakes, the danger lies in the fact that it's dehumanizing life and it's dehumanizing health. It means that the individual and the individual circumstances of that particular life at this moment in time, it doesn't matter anymore. Yeah, there's no relationship between the state of health as measured and interpreted by the medical profession and what is happening to that person in his life at that moment in time. To them, it only matters if you've driven your car into a brick wall, or you've been shot or whatever. Then it matters. And it matters to them when they want it to matter, because when you start coughing and then I start coughing, then all of a sudden it's an invisible particle that cannot be proven in any way, shape, or form that has moved from your cough to my throat and my lungs. And then the circumstances do matter to them. But the individual ones, what makes your blood pressure go up, what makes your sugars go up, what makes your cholesterol go up, all of that doesn't matter. Yeah, that doesn't matter. Only they cherry pick what they want to make their diagnosis. And that is dangerous, because they now they pretend it's written in stone. You got a diagnosis, it's stuck on your forehead, it sticks with you for the rest of your life. Once they say you're a diabetic, you're always a diabetic. Once they say you've got high blood pressure, you've always got high blood pressure. And they treat you like that because it's treatment for life. Yeah. So the diagnosis has moved in this way. Also, in the old days, not so very old, not so very long ago, a diagnosis was for the moment. Even things like high blood pressure or high sugar levels, call it diabetes, it was for the moment. And then sometime later, we may do another test and go, oh, it's okay. So that's fine. You don't need to take any tablets anymore. You don't have to consider yourself to be ill or have a disease anymore. You're okay now. You got over it. Nowadays, you're not allowed to get over diseases or their diagnosis of diseases. Even when they declare you cancer-free after a cancer diagnosis, you'll always be a cancer patient. Why? Because you always have to go for control tests. It doesn't matter whether you feel well or you don't feel well, whether you've got symptoms or signs or not. It doesn't matter. Go for the test. Test will tell us. And people now go and have health tests and then sit at home for 1, 2, 3 weeks, anxiously waiting for the result. And anxiety is one of the worst, chronic anxiety is one of the worst things that happen to your balance in life. So, you know, what is a diagnosis worth? Nothing, unless you want to keep people ill. Otherwise, just look at how life is today and realize that it will change, might change tomorrow, for the better, for the worse. But we'll see that tomorrow. We don't have to speculate on that today. We can just watch, see which way it goes. And if we then take into account that we start off with saying inflammation and therefore also infection is a healing process, so it's not a disease, then you immediately see the fork in the road. The medical profession takes you one way. When you have an inflammation or an infection, you're ill, and you could be seriously ill. This could get worse. You could die from this. Or we take you the other road and say, this is a healing. Either it heals up completely, or it doesn't, in which case there are some things you can do to help your system to heal up completely. So it's nowadays, I would say that the medical diagnosis is one of the worst things that can happen to you. If you really want to get healthy, the first thing you need to do, I'm sorry to say, is stay away from any doctor or any test that they can offer you, because it leads you away from health always.
Yeah, I mean, I can confirm that, we don't use the medic. I mean, if I got run over by a bus, fix me up, stitch me back together, put me bones in place. Yeah, if that happened to me children, straight away to the ambulance. But as we're a medical free family, I can actually say, if you don't analyze this, if you're feeling tired, run down, you got a cold, go to bed for a couple of days. We never pass over to chronic illness. My children are the healthiest children I know. Everybody gets tired and a bit run down now and again. Oh, let's just have a couple of days off, chill out, watch some DVDs and just rest. And then absolutely healthy. And one of the reasons I got heavily involved in this particular topic was with children, because as a parent, you lose your power with your children because you're not an expert. Once you step into the medical system, you've lost your power over your children. And as everything's treating, they claim, oh, like you said, oh, you could die because of that. Well, actually, a lot of the time, the suppressive treatments are creating the worst outcome, whereas actually a week in bed would have been the best outcome.
Yeah, and as far as children is concerned, as you mentioned, it's pretty dangerous nowadays because of what they see as the absolute truth of the interpretation of their tests. They see that as an absolute truth. That means that even courts will choose the side of the medical profession. Always. You as a parent, as you said, you're not an expert. You're not an expert on diseases, but I'm afraid to say you are the only expert on your child. But they consider you not to be the expert, and the experts have got objective proof of what is wrong. And they will then dominate the whole narrative. And you will lose control over your children. You could even lose literally your children.
Yeah. So I don't want to spend too much thing on this one then, because for me, the supplement industry, so-called a part of the health industry, is almost like become another enormous business. So we break down things into things, vitamin this, vitamin that, this hormone, this mineral. When in nature, I mean, I've had a positive outcome of an inflammation with nettle tea, but it was the whole nettle tea, boiled up, drank tea, and it wasn't the iron or the vitamin C or whatever. It was this whole combination. And now people are saying, oh, I need this specific vitamin supplement, this, that. Oh, it's food-based, it's okay. But it just seems like another industry for me.
Well, it is another industry. Well, no, it's the same industry. It's actually the same pharmaceutical industry that has taken over the herbal scene, if you like. It's the same pharmaceutical industry that provides us with the supplements, whether they're vitamins or minerals or whatever. If you really want to take something or use something that you feel might help your particular situation, then I would suggest you go into the woods or your garden or whatever, and you use the herbs that are there. You don't need Chinese herbs or Indian herbs. everything that you need, you can find in your own area. That is basically how it works. They're all basically the same sort of things. It's just that they may have a bit of a different strength or slightly different influence. But then again, you know, these herbs grow in different places and are meant for people in different cultures and different living conditions. But it's an industry. And as soon as, and what does the industry do? Why am I saying pharmaceutical industry? It's based on the same principle, and that is you have to look for the active ingredient in whatever it is that you're going to use. The active ingredient, then you have to purify it so that you know exactly how much you're taking from it. And then you put on a dosage, 2 drops of this, you know, not 5, 2, and 3 times a day or once a day or whatever. So it becomes a prescription, like a medical prescription. That is what they do. From the moment you see that, you're on the wrong track. You're getting lost in the details of an industry, of an industrial complex. If you can't use it in its entirety, as you mentioned, you know, then don't use it at all. But when I took my high dosage of vitamin C, you know, it gets a lot better, and so on and so forth. Yes, here's the trick, and that is why they get away with it. Whenever you make a serious change in your habit, so also what we put in our mouth, whenever you make a serious change in your habit, your system wakes up to this and starts looking for the balance. So it has to respond to whatever you're putting in, you know, whether it's, if you like, morphine or vitamin C, your system has to deal with that. And while it's generating more and more energy to deal with that, if there is something not quite right, something out of balance, that extra energy will also help to rebalance that system, whatever it is. So whenever you start taking a new supplement, or you start taking a supplement or a vitamin or a mineral or whatever, you know, you get a response that makes you feel better. And then you go, oh, this works for me, so I have to keep using it. And then you go, after a while, maybe you go, I'm feeling fine now. I'm not going to take it anymore. And once I stop it, what does that mean to your system? You change your habit. So your system responds to it, which means another clearing out period. But a clearing out period means I'm not feeling too well. Oh, when I stop taking my supplement, I'm starting to feel worse again. So I have to start taking my supplement again. But when you keep taking your supplement all the time, you notice, or a lot of people notice, that it doesn't seem to be as effective as when I first started taking it. No, because your system has now made it into a habit. It knows it's coming. It's prepared. It doesn't worry about it. It doesn't spend any extra energy dealing with it, whatever it is. So the effectiveness is lost. The only effectiveness, real effect of taking supplements, vitamins, whatever, is when you start taking it. That is when you feel the effect. That is when your system wakes up and has to respond to it and responds to it. And then you feel an effect, and then it starts wearing off. it starts to diminish in time and it almost disappears. If you do want to take supplements, one, I would suggest stay away from industrial products and go into your own garden and do whatever. Get something that you think or that you've read about that may help your condition there. Then use it frequently, and use it for a short period of time. A short period of time may mean 3-4 days for acute situation, or it may mean 3-4 weeks for more chronic things, and then stop it altogether. Stop, because by that time you've lost your initial effect. And stop for at least 3 weeks or so. If then you feel not so good, want to try it again, do it again. So you do it in short periods of time, you have breaks, serious breaks from it, and then you do it again. And each time you will get some positive effect from it. But do realize, no matter what the supplement is, no matter what the vitamin or the mineral, whatever, no matter what it is, it's not going to cure you. It's not going to heal you. Your problem cannot be rectified by something that you're taking in. I mean substance that you're taking in. It cannot be rectified that way.
Yeah, no, it's kind of like symptomatic allopathic thinking, but with a different product.
Yeah.
And I mean, I always say to friends, you know, I'll give you an example. I go, oh, I'm not going to a doctor. I'm going to go to my herbalist or my local supplement shop. And I'll say, I've got bad skin. I'm tired. I haven't got any energy. Oh, we'll give you this magnesium. That'll sort you out. But what they don't know is my wife hates me. My kids won't speak to me. I'm under pressure at work. I've got a gambling habit, you know, all my life things. And without that knowledge, they're thinking my tiredness will be fixed by a bit of magnesium spray.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it. And don't look at adverts on television, for instance, or in papers and magazines. You know, there's so many adverts for supplements and vitamins. So who is paying for all that? It's the same industry that pays for the adverts for Nurofen. Same thing.
Yeah. And it's so the natural, you would say, garden herbal, not cures, garble supplements, should we say, herbal, you know, you go in your own garden, you get your nettles, extra. That's been hijacked. And now if we go into alternative therapies, now that would have had some benefits, maybe your naturopath, your homeopath, etc. That's also been hijacked.
Yeah.
But also in your journey through all these therapies, you've also found the limitations in them, even in their natural use. They could help greatly, but there would still be a limit if the person involved wasn't partaking in the process. So you've got the two options of one, the natural therapeutics has been hijacked, and two, even in its natural state, there would be a natural limitation because it's not just the homeopathic message you give, it's how the message is received also.
Yeah, and I would now go as far as saying that the therapist, whatever method he or she is using, the therapist is in the way of your healing. It's standing in your way. The therapist is not helping you. Why not? Because you're focused on a method. The acupuncture is going to help me. You know, the homeopathy is going to help me. The osteopathy is going to help me. Natural remedies are going to help me to get better, to become healthy again. No, it isn't. The only thing that is going to get you healthy is you making different choices in your life, choices that will change your life in the areas that you're now struggling with. That's the only thing. So any therapist that is doing it for you is not going to get you there. It is taking your mind off the real thing in life, and that is you are creating your own health. Nobody else can do it for you. The only thing they can do is relieve some of the symptoms, but by doing so, they seem to, or people want to, believe, and they convey the message that this is going to make you healthy again. It is just symptomatic, you know, and anybody that gives the impression that they will cure you or they will heal you diverts your attention from yourself. You give the power to another person while you need all the energy, all the power for yourself, because that is where the healing happens.
Yeah, so I've got a few more questions. I'm just wary of the time. So this will be a few quick ones. So as rather as diagnostics, shall we say, you studied and talk about the chakra system. So what's your understanding of what is now called German New Medicine, which from my observations seems to be a very detailed explanation of a very simplistic chakra system? It seems to be talking about the same thing.
Yes. One of the things that I would say to people when they follow the new German medicine is when they talk about trauma, a traumatic event, something we're stuck in a trauma, then you have to think about things can occur not by a serious and a hefty impact. It can also occur by a drop of water falling on the same spot time and time again. So something that is not a traumatic experience and is not a dramatic event, but a continuous input of things that are making my life, pushing my life out of line. So that I think is very important. The other thing, as you say, detail. Do I have to know exactly what it is? No, I don't. You need to look forward, not back. Don't put your energy into finding out all the little details from how I got here. It doesn't matter how I got here. I don't need to go back. I need to go forward. So where I am now, what are my options? How can I move forward? That to me is far more important.
Yeah, yeah. So I was asked by a few people if I give you one example of a very common ailment, shall we say, and how you would look at it as an energetic way and kind of a symptomatic treatment way. So what can I physically do and what is the energy behind it? So the most common complaint we could think of was like hemorrhoids, which is a common ailment, shall we say. So if we just look at it from two aspects, one, the energy behind it, what part of the body is that functioning, and what symptomatic treatment somebody could do while they're dealing with that energy.
So hemorrhoids are caused by excess pressure, the bottom of the pelvis. That is why these blood vessels are enlarging and eventually even push out almost through the skin, if you like. So it's high pressure in the bottom part of your pelvis, which also includes your hips. Yeah, and that will cause other symptomatic problems for legs, so hips, knees, ankles, blood circulation, and so on. So what can you do symptomatically? You need to get that area shrunk again, which means ice. You need to ice it, you need to cool it down. So ice packs, and the other thing, because you can't walk around all day with an ice pack between your buttocks, what you can do is use some oil, but then a cooling oil like coconut oil, and keep that area quite oily, and via coconut oil or aloe vera, but pure aloe vera then, so best to use the plant and not the commercial thing, to rub that in frequently. That's symptomatically, but it's about your balance in life over your hips, you know, which is holding up the rest of you. So it's very fundamental to the way your life is structured at that particular moment in time.
Yeah. So we just got a few more minutes. Well, this is just an odd one because I want to go. I'm interested in the mind a lot, and we mentioned in allergies the split personality. Only one may have the allergy. So this is something from Edith. And you know the roads in Cornwall are quite country roads and winding. So if she's a passenger in the car, she'll get car sick. If she's driving, she doesn't.
Yeah.
So there's obviously a mind thing going on there.
Yeah. It is a mindset. You know, when you're driving, two things are different from when you're a passenger. One, your focus. Yeah. You're focusing, and two, you're in control. And the combination of the two gives you a safe feeling. If you're sitting in the passenger seat, you've got to let go of that control idea. And if you can't, you're in trouble. And the focus is different, because when you're driving, you're also focusing on your feet, on your hands, and on the road. When you're sitting as a passenger, you may be watching the traffic in the same way, but your hands and feet are not following. And that is why very often people that have got a bit of this problem as a passenger, when there is an emergency stop all of a sudden, they will tell you that they pushed the brakes harder than the driver did. So in other words, you know, they're in there. You need to let go of that. You need to concentrate on being somebody else, if you like, or being the same person in a different position, and therefore displaying a different reactive pattern. So yes, it's a mindset.
Yeah. So as we're coming into the end of this series now, if you just keep an eye on the time, I'll leave this with you now. So what I'm going to do below is leave a couple of links. The big thing now is freedom of society, but you did a video about a year ago called Self-Empowerment, which I'm going to put as a link below, but people can just scroll back where you talk about freedom in society. And if anybody wants to contact you after these conversations or pursue more your work, you have the 3 websites which are on that video. So people can watch that video, see your contacts. I'll leave you with the last few words about quantic society, this idea of a future society, not your society, but the structure of this new society and how people can get into contact and look at this idea of quantics.
Yes, you can look up the website www.quantics.org. Quantics is Quantics, and it's basically a study. It's a life study. It's based on nature, the laws of nature, and you can find them there, and you can start learning about them. You can also join up so that we can start building a society of mind, a different mindset, a different approach to life from a nature's point of view. That's the basis. That is what it's all about.
Yeah, and at this present moment, we don't have to be in the same physical community, but a mind community at the moment, and we could move into the same community. But I think,
Absolutely.
yeah, we're just running out of time there. So I think this has been a good series. I think it's a good point to end it, and I'll leave you with the last word.
Everybody, best of luck. Start changing now.